The snow was falling softly outside Pine Ridge Ski Lodge when Staff Sergeant James Cooper pulled into the crowded parking lot in his black Ford F-150. The afternoon sun was starting to fade, casting long shadows across the snow-covered ground. Cooper had been driving for 6 hours straight, hoping to find some peace and quiet after his third tour in Afghanistan. His commanding officer had practically ordered him to take this vacation, saying he needed to decompress and reset. As Cooper searched for a parking spot, he noticed a group of motorcycles taking up several spaces near the lodge entrance. They were expensive bikes, Harley Davidsons with lots of chrome and custom paint jobs. In the military, Cooper had learned to notice details, and he couldn't help but count them: 8 motorcycles, which meant 8 riders somewhere nearby. Just as he found a spot and started unloading his ski gear, loud laughter and shouting came from the lodge's front entrance. A group of men in leather jackets walked out, their boots crunching in the snow. They were big guys, covered in tattoos, with long beards and leather vests showing their gang patches. Cooper didn't need his military training to know these weren't ordinary weekend bikers. Everything about them screamed trouble. The bikers were making their way toward their motorcycles when they spotted an old couple trying to carry their luggage across the parking lot. The couple was struggling with their bags in the snow, and the old man almost slipped. Instead of helping, the bikers started laughing and making jokes about them. "Hey, Gramps, better watch your step," one of them called out, while another made chicken noises. "Maybe you should pick a retirement home instead." Cooper watched as the elderly couple hurried past, the old man's face red with embarrassment and anger. He felt his jaw tighten, but years of discipline kept him in check. This wasn't the time or place. Not yet. He'd seen enough combat to know you don't jump into situations without understanding them fully. As Cooper grabbed his duffel bag and ski equipment from his truck, he could feel the biker's eyes on him. His military haircut and straight posture probably gave him away. Soldiers tend to recognize each other, even in civilian clothes. But these guys weren't soldiers. They were predators who picked on the weak, and Cooper had dealt with plenty of their kind before. "Hey, Jarhead," one of the bikers called out. He was the biggest of the group, with a snake tattoo crawling up his neck. "Nice skis. Hope you don't break them." Cooper turned slowly, his face calm and neutral. He looked directly at the man who'd spoken, noting the president patch on his vest. So this was their leader. The other bikers watched, waiting to see what would happen. "Thanks for the concern," Cooper replied evenly, his voice carrying across the parking lot. He didn't say more, but he held the leader's gaze for an extra second before turning away. It was enough to make his point. He wasn't afraid, but he also wasn't looking for trouble. As Cooper walked toward the lodge entrance, he could hear the bikers muttering and laughing behind him. He caught bits of their conversation. "Think he's tough," and "teach him later." But Cooper wasn't worried. He faced much worse than a group of overconfident bikers. Inside the lodge, the warmth hit him immediately. The lobby was exactly what you'd expect from a ski resort. High wooden beams, a massive stone fireplace, and large windows showing the snowy mountains outside. At the front desk, a young woman with a name tag reading Sarah greeted him with a smile. "Welcome to Pine Ridge Lodge, sir. Do you have a reservation?" As Cooper checked in, he could hear the bikers' motorcycles revving outside, their engines echoing off the mountains. Sarah's smile faltered slightly at the sound. "Don't worry about them," Cooper said quietly. "They're just making noise." Sarah looked relieved that someone else had noticed. "They checked in yesterday," she whispered. "They've been scaring all our guests. We called the police, but we're pretty far from town." Cooper nodded understanding as he took his room key. He hadn't come here looking for trouble, but as he headed toward his room, he had a feeling trouble had found him anyway. That was okay. Staff Sergeant James Cooper knew how to handle trouble. After unpacking his bags, Cooper decided to head down to the lodge's restaurant for dinner. The long drive had left him hungry, and he could smell something delicious coming from the dining room. The restaurant was warm and cozy, with wooden tables and a great view of the ski slopes through large windows. Now that the sun had set, small lights twinkled in the snow outside. He chose a quiet table in the corner, where he could see the entire room, another habit from his military days. Cooper noticed the biker gang was already there, spread across 3 tables they'd pushed together. They were being loud, laughing and cursing, while other guests tried to eat their meals in uncomfortable silence. A young waitress named Jenny approached his table. She looked tired and nervous, and Cooper could guess why. Her hands shook slightly as she handed him the menu. "Good evening, sir," she said quietly. "Can I get you something to drink?" Before Cooper could answer, there was a loud crash from the biker's table. One of them had accidentally knocked over his beer bottle, and now they were all laughing as beer dripped onto the floor. "Hey, sweetheart," the leader with the snake tattoo called out to Jenny. "Get over here and clean this up, and bring us another round." Jenny's face went pale, but she turned to go help. Cooper noticed how she tried to stay just out of their reach as she cleaned up the mess. The restaurant manager, a thin man in a white shirt, watched from near the kitchen but did nothing to help. While Cooper looked over the menu, he kept one eye on the situation. He counted 8 bikers total, just as he'd thought from the motorcycles outside. The leader, Snake, as the others called him, seemed to be the main troublemaker, with 2 bigger guys acting as his main backup. The others followed their lead, getting louder and more obnoxious as they drank more beer. When Jenny finally made it back to take Cooper's order, you could see she was close to tears. "I'm sorry for the wait," she whispered. "It's been a difficult evening." "No problem at all," Cooper said kindly. "I'll have the steak, medium rare, and some water, please." As Jenny walked away with his order, Snake stuck out his foot, trying to trip her. She managed to avoid falling, but just barely. The bikers roared with laughter. Cooper felt his anger rising, but he stayed calm. In Afghanistan, he'd learned that acting without a plan could get people killed. He needed to understand the situation better before doing anything. His food arrived quickly. Jenny seemed grateful to have a normal customer to serve. The steak was good, and Cooper ate while watching the room. He noticed how the bikers had positioned themselves. Snake in the middle, his 2 biggest guys closest to the door, the others spread out to watch the room. They might be thugs, but they weren't completely stupid. When it came time to pay their bill, the real trouble started. Snake looked at the paper Jenny handed him and stood up, towering over her. $300? He growled. "For a few burgers and beers? I don't think so, sweetheart." That's the correct amount," Jenny said, her voice trembling. "You had 12 rounds of drinks and—" "I said I don't think so," Snake interrupted. He pulled out some crumpled bills and threw them on the table. "Here's 100. That's more than enough." The restaurant manager finally approached, but he stayed a safe distance away. "Is there a problem here?" he asked weakly. "No problem," Snake said with a dangerous smile. "We're just leaving, and if anybody's got an issue with that." He left the threat hanging in the air. Cooper finished his meal slowly, watching as the bikers strutted out of the restaurant. He could see Jenny gathering the money with shaking hands. They'd left her no tip at all. When he paid his own bill, he added an extra $50. "You don't have to," Jenny started to say. "It's okay," Cooper told her. "Just be careful around those guys." As he walked back to his room, Cooper thought about what he'd seen. The bikers were bullies who picked on people who couldn't fight back. They were used to getting their way through fear and intimidation. But Cooper had faced much worse enemies in much more dangerous places. If these guys wanted trouble, they'd soon learn they'd picked the wrong target. The next morning, Cooper woke up early. Years of military routine made it impossible for him to sleep in, even on vacation. He got dressed in his ski gear and headed out to his truck to get his equipment. The parking lot was quiet and dark, with just a hint of sunrise touching the mountains. As he walked between the parked cars, Cooper heard voices coming from behind a large SUV. He moved quietly, another habit from his military days. When he peeked around the corner, he saw 2 of the bikers from last night. They were trying to break into a blue minivan. "Hurry up, Rick," one of them whispered. "Snake wants us back before anyone notices." The other biker, Rick, was using a metal tool to try and force the van's lock. "Almost got it," he muttered. "There's a laptop bag in the back seat. Should be worth something." Cooper had seen enough. He stepped out from behind the SUV, moving deliberately so they would hear his boots in the snow. Both bikers spun around, Rick quickly hiding the tool behind his back. "Nice morning for a walk," Cooper said calmly. He recognized them from dinner last night. They were 2 of Snake's followers, the ones who laughed the loudest at their leader's jokes. "Mind your own business, soldier boy," the first biker said, trying to sound tough. But Cooper could hear the nervousness in his voice. "This is my business," Cooper replied. He nodded toward the minivan. That belongs to the family in room 212. They have 3 kids. The laptop probably has all their vacation photos. The bikers looked at each other, surprised that Cooper knew these details. They didn't know that he'd spent years training to notice everything around him, to remember every detail that might keep him alive in combat. "Look, tough guy," Rick said, stepping forward. "You don't want to mess with us. Snake wouldn't like it." Cooper didn't move. He'd faced down Taliban fighters in dark alleys. These two didn't scare him, and I don't think Snake would like explaining to the police why his friends were breaking into cars, especially since the lodge installed security cameras last month. Cooper pointed up at a small camera on the building's corner. The bikers looked where he was pointing. There was no camera. Cooper had made that up, but they didn't know that. You could see the doubt in their faces as they tried to decide what to do. "Tell Snake something from me," Cooper said, his voice getting quieter. In the military, he'd learned that speaking softly often scared people more than yelling. "Tell him that this lodge is under my protection now. No more harassing guests. No more stealing. No more trouble." "You threatening us?" Rick asked, but he was already backing away. "Just giving some friendly advice," Cooper replied. "I'd hate to see anyone get hurt." The bikers hurried away, looking back over their shoulders. Cooper waited until they were gone, then checked the minivan. They hadn't managed to break in. The family's laptop was still safe. As Cooper walked back to his truck to get his skis, he heard motorcycles starting up. A few minutes later, 4 bikes roared past him, heading toward town. He recognized Rick and his friend among the riders. When Cooper reached the lodge's front desk, Sarah was just starting her morning shift. She looked worried. "Everything okay?" Cooper asked. "You seem nervous." Sarah glanced around before speaking quietly. "Those bikers, they were asking about you this morning, wanting to know which room you're in. I couldn't tell them, but..." She twisted her hands together. "Maybe you should be careful." Cooper gave her a reassuring smile. "Don't worry about me, but if you see them causing any more trouble, let me know." He headed to the ski lift, thinking about what had just happened. He'd hoped to avoid confrontation, but those bikers were leaving him no choice. They were used to people being afraid of them, backing down from their threats. But Cooper had spent too many years fighting real enemies to be scared of bullies. As he rode the lift up the mountain, Cooper could see more motorcycles arriving at the lodge below. It looked like Rick had gone to get reinforcements. That was okay. Cooper had backup of his own, not other people, but years of training and experience that these bikers couldn't imagine. If they wanted to escalate things, he was ready. Cooper spent the morning skiing, enjoying the fresh powder on the slopes, but his mind kept going back to the situation with the bikers. As a soldier, he'd learned to trust his instincts, and right now those instincts were telling him that trouble was coming. Around lunchtime, he returned to the lodge. The restaurant was busy with skiers taking a break, but Cooper noticed something different. The usual happy chatter was missing. Instead, people were eating quickly and speaking in whispers. He soon saw why. Snake and his gang had taken over the bar area. There were more of them now. Cooper counted 12 bikes parked outside. They were drinking beer, even though it wasn't even 1 p.m., and giving threatening looks to anyone who walked past. Jenny, the waitress from last night, saw Cooper and hurried over to him. Her face was pale. "You shouldn't be here," she whispered. "They've been asking about you all morning. Snake is really angry about what happened in the parking lot." "Have they hurt anyone?" Cooper asked quietly. Jenny shook her head. "Not yet, but they scared a family so badly they checked out early. And She stopped, looking afraid. "What did they do?" "They trashed the ski rental shop. Broke some equipment. The owner called the police, but they said it would take at least 2 hours to get here because of the snow." Cooper nodded slowly. It was a common tactic. Isolate the target, show force, create fear. He'd seen terrorist groups use the same strategy in small Afghan villages. "Thank you for telling me," he said to Jenny. "Stay away from them if you can." Cooper got a sandwich to go and headed back to his room. As he walked down the hallway, he could tell something was wrong before he even reached his door. There was a strange smell in the air of spray paint. Someone had painted a crude skull on his door, with the words "Dead Man" written underneath in red. Cooper took a photo with his phone, then went inside. The room itself hadn't been touched. The bikers hadn't been brave enough to break in, but there was a note that had been shoved under the door. The note was typed, not handwritten. It read, "Last chance, soldier boy. Leave now or we'll make you wish you had. You don't know who you're messing with." Cooper actually smiled as he read it. In Afghanistan, he received much scarier threats from much more dangerous people. These bikers were trying to act tough, but their actions showed their weakness. Real killers didn't leave warning notes. He was folding the paper when someone knocked on his door. Cooper moved to the side, another combat habit, before asking, "Who is it?" "Sarah from the front desk, sir." Cooper opened the door carefully. Sarah looked terrified. "I'm so sorry," she said quickly. "They made me tell them your room number. Their leader, he said he'd hurt my little sister. She works in the kitchen." "It's not your fault," Cooper assured her. "Did they say anything else?" Sarah nodded. "They were talking about how they've done this before. Last summer, they forced 3 different lodges to pay them protection money. The police couldn't prove anything because no one would testify. People were too scared." This was useful information. Cooper had suspected the gang had a pattern, and now he knew for sure. "Does anyone stand up to them?" he asked. "One lodge owner tried," Sarah said. "They burned his place down. Made it look like an accident with the electrical system." She grabbed Cooper's arm. "Please be careful. They're dangerous." "So am I," Cooper said quietly. After Sarah left, Cooper sat down to think. The bikers were escalating things, trying to scare him away. But they'd made a mistake. The spray paint, the note, Sarah's story, it all told him exactly what kind of people he was dealing with. They weren't hardened criminals. They were bullies who got their way through fear and intimidation. Cooper checked his watch. The sun would set in a few hours. If he knew people like this, and he did, they'd make their move after dark. That was fine with him. Night operations had always been his specialty. Evening came quickly in the mountains. Cooper had spent the afternoon preparing, just as he would before any military operation. He walked through the lodge several times, memorizing the layout. He knew every exit, every dark corner, and every security camera. Most importantly, he knew where the bikers liked to gather. Around 7 p.m., Cooper was returning from dinner when he heard something that made him stop. A muffled cry came from the lodge's storage area, near the back of the building. Most guests never went there, but Cooper had noticed it during his earlier walks. He moved silently down the hallway, another skill learned from years of combat. As he got closer, he could hear voices, angry, threatening voices that he recognized. "You should have kept your mouth shut, old man," Snake's voice said. "Nobody likes a snitch." Cooper reached the storage area door and looked through its small window. What he saw made his blood boil. The elderly couple from the parking lot yesterday was backed into a corner. The old man stood in front of his wife, trying to protect her, but his hands were shaking. Snake and 4 of his biggest guys had them surrounded. "We didn't call the police," the old man said. "Please, just let us go." "Liar," one of the bikers shouted. "We saw you talking to them on your phone." Cooper had seen enough. He'd been patient, following the rules he'd learned in the military about waiting and watching. But there was another military rule: protect civilians from harm. These bikers had just crossed a line they couldn't uncross. He pulled open the door. The sound made everyone turn around. "Let them go," Cooper said quietly. His voice was calm, but anyone who knew combat would recognize the tone. It was the voice of someone who was done talking. Snake's face turned red with anger. "Well, look who it is, the tough guy soldier." He pointed at Cooper. "Close that door, boys. Looks like we get to take care of 2 problems at once." 2 bikers moved to block the exit. They were big guys, probably used to scaring people with their size alone. Cooper noticed they were carrying metal pipes. The other 2 moved to surround him, while Snake stayed near the old couple. "Last chance," Cooper said. "Step aside and let them leave." Snake laughed. "Or what? There's 5 of us and 1 of you, soldier boy, and your army friends aren't here to help you." Cooper's face didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes. Snake's laugh died in his throat as he recognized what he was seeing. It wasn't fear in the soldier's eyes. It was focus. The kind of focus that came from facing real danger, real enemies. "You're right," Cooper said softly. "I'm alone. Just like I was alone when I had to fight my way out of a Taliban ambush. Just like I was alone when I had to clear buildings full of insurgents." He took 1 step forward. Do you know what I learned from that? The bikers gripped their pipes tighter, but Cooper could see uncertainty in their faces. I learned that being alone doesn't matter. Cooper continued. What matters is training, experience. And right now, you're making a big mistake. You think you see a single soldier. His voice got even quieter. What you should see is a weapon. One that's been shaped by 3 tours of combat. One that's been trained by the best military in the world. The old couple was forgotten as all 5 bikers focused on Cooper. That was good. It was exactly what he wanted. He could see Snake trying to decide what to do, trying to figure out if Cooper was bluffing. He wasn't bluffing. So I'll say it one more time, Cooper said, shifting his weight slightly. Let them go. Snake's face twisted with rage. Get him, he shouted. The 4 bikers moved in with their pipes raised. Cooper let out a slow breath. He hadn't started this fight, but he was about to finish it. The first biker swung his pipe at Cooper's head. To everyone watching, Cooper barely seemed to move. One moment he was standing still, the next he was inside the biker's guard. The pipe whooshed harmlessly past his ear. Cooper struck 3 times in less than a second. Throat, solar plexus, knee. The biker dropped his pipe and fell, gasping for air. Before the metal pipe could clang on the ground, Cooper caught it with his left hand. One down, Cooper said quietly. The remaining bikers hesitated. They'd expected an easy fight. 5 tough guys against 1 man. But the way their friend had gone down told them this wasn't going to be easy at all. 2 of them came at Cooper together, trying to trap him between their weapons. Cooper moved like water, flowing between their wild swings. He'd fought in close quarters before, narrow alleys in Baghdad, tight mountain caves in Afghanistan. This storage room gave him plenty of space to work. The pipe in Cooper's hand became a blur. He didn't swing it hard enough to cause serious damage, but the quick, precise strikes found vulnerable spots: wrists, elbows, collarbones. Both bikers dropped their weapons, stumbling back with pained expressions. 3 down, Cooper counted, his breathing still calm and steady. Who's next? The 4th biker, a huge man with tattoos covering his arms, roared and charged forward. He was trying to use his size, hoping to tackle Cooper into the wall. It might have worked on someone else, but Cooper had trained with Navy SEALs, Marines, and Special Forces operators. He knew how to handle bigger opponents. Cooper stepped aside at the last moment, using the big man's momentum against him. A quick sweep of his legs, a controlled throw, and the biker crashed into a stack of empty cardboard boxes. He didn't get up. And then there was one, Cooper said, turning to face Snake. Snake had been watching everything, his face growing paler with each passing second. The elderly couple was forgotten as he realized just how badly he had miscalculated. He pulled out a switchblade knife, trying to look tough. Stay back, Snake warned, his voice shaking. I'll cut you. Cooper almost looked disappointed. A knife? Really? He set the pipe down carefully. In Kandahar, I once had to disarm a terrorist who had actual combat training and a military-grade combat knife. You're holding that blade like you've never used it in a real fight. I'm warning you. Snake took a wild swing with the knife. Cooper's response was so fast that even the old couple, watching from their corner, barely saw what happened. He blocked Snake's arm, twisted, and suddenly the knife clattered to the floor. Snake found himself locked in a hold that sent waves of pain through his shoulder and arm. Listen carefully, Cooper said into Snake's ear. I could end this right now. 1 more pound of pressure and your shoulder dislocates. A little twist and your elbow breaks. But I'm not going to do that. Want to know why? Snake whimpered in pain. Because I'm not like you. I don't hurt people to feel powerful. The skills I have, they're for protecting people, not bullying them. Cooper looked at the elderly couple. Sir, ma'am, please go to the front desk. Tell them to call the police, and tell them to bring a first aid kit. These gentlemen are going to need some ice packs. The couple hurried out. Snake tried to struggle, but Cooper's grip was like iron. Your gang is done here, Cooper told him. When the police come, I'm going to tell them about the protection money, the vandalism, everything. And if you ever come back to this lodge, or if I hear about you bothering any other places. He let the pressure increase just slightly, making Snake gasp. Well, let's just say I can always take another skiing vacation. Through the storage room window, Cooper could see red and blue lights reflecting off the snow. The police had finally arrived. He looked around at the groaning bikers on the floor. "Welcome to the mountains, boys," Cooper said with a slight smile. "Hope you enjoyed your stay." The storage room quickly filled with police officers, their boots crunching on the scattered debris from the fight. 2 officers immediately handcuffed Snake, while others checked on the injured bikers. Cooper stood calmly to the side, hands visible, following the procedures he'd learned in the military for dealing with law enforcement. "Staff Sergeant James Cooper," he said to the lead officer, a tall woman with graying hair and a name tag reading Captain Martinez. "I can explain everything that happened here." Captain Martinez looked around the room, taking in the scene. 4 bikers were sitting against the wall, holding various ice packs to their injuries. None of them would meet her eyes. Snake was still trying to act tough, but he kept wincing every time he moved his shoulder. "We've been trying to catch these guys for months," Martinez said. "They've been terrorizing lodges all across 3 counties, but nobody would testify against them." She turned to Cooper. "Until now, I'm guessing?" Cooper nodded. "I'll tell you everything. The protection money, the vandalism, the threats. And I'm pretty sure the elderly couple they were threatening will testify too." The old man and his wife were giving their statement to another officer. The woman was still shaking, but her husband stood straight and proud. When he saw Cooper looking their way, he gave a grateful nod. Sarah from the front desk appeared in the doorway, looking amazed at the scene. "The other bikers," she said quickly. "The ones who were in the bar, they all ran away when they heard the police coming. But I got their license plate numbers." Captain Martinez smiled. "Good work. We'll track them down." She turned back to Cooper. "Would you mind coming down to the station to give a formal statement? We'll need to document everything properly." "Of course," Cooper replied. "But first," he walked over to Snake, who was being led out by 2 officers. "Remember what I said. Don't come back here. Ever." Snake tried to look tough one last time. "This isn't over, soldier boy." Cooper just smiled. "Yes, it is. You just don't know it yet." The next hour was busy. Paramedics arrived to check the injured bikers, though none of them needed serious medical attention. Cooper had been careful to use just enough force to subdue them without causing lasting harm. The police took photographs of everything, including the threatening message that had been painted on Cooper's door. Jenny, the waitress from the restaurant, came running in. "Is everyone okay?" "We heard fighting, and..." She stopped when she saw the bikers being led away in handcuffs. A big smile spread across her face. "They won't be bothering anyone anymore," Cooper told her. The lodge manager appeared, looking both relieved and worried. "Mr. Cooper, I can't thank you enough. But the damage to the storage room..." "Send me the bill," Cooper said. "Though I think most of it was just those cardboard boxes." "Bill? No. The manager shook his head quickly. "You saved us from those criminals. Your stay here is completely free, and you're welcome back anytime." As things calmed down, Cooper gave his statement to Captain Martinez. He explained everything that had happened, from the first encounter in the parking lot to the final confrontation. The captain took detailed notes, nodding as pieces of other cases started fitting together. "You know," she said when they were finished, "we could use someone with your skills on the force. Ever thought about becoming a police officer?" Cooper smiled but shook his head. "Thank you, but I'm still active duty. My leave ends in a week." "Well, if you ever change your mind..." Martinez handed him her card. "At least stay in touch. We might need your testimony if any of these guys try to fight the charges." As Cooper walked back to his room that night, the lodge felt different. People were smiling again, talking and laughing in the halls. The fear that had hung over everything was gone. He looked out a window at the snowy mountains. It hadn't been the quiet vacation he'd planned, but maybe this was better. Sometimes the best way to find peace was to face trouble head-on and deal with it. 3 days later, Cooper stood in the lodge's parking lot, loading his bags into his truck. The morning sun made the snow sparkle, and the mountain air was crisp and clean. His vacation hadn't gone as planned, but he felt strangely refreshed anyway. The local newspaper had run a story about the biker gang's arrest. According to Captain Martinez, who had called him yesterday, other lodge owners were coming forward with similar stories. The police had already arrested 4 more gang members who had tried to flee to the next state. Snake and his closest followers were facing serious charges, with multiple witnesses now willing to testify. As Cooper closed his truck's tailgate, he heard footsteps in the snow behind him. It was the elderly couple, Mr. and Mrs. Chen, coming to say goodbye. "We can't thank you enough," Mrs. Chen said, her eyes watery. "We've been coming to this lodge for 20 years. Last week, we thought we'd have to stop because of those awful men." "You don't have to thank me," Cooper replied. "I'm just glad you're safe." Mr. Chen stepped forward and handed Cooper an envelope. "We know you won't take money as thanks, so we made a donation in your name to the Wounded Warrior Project. They help soldiers like you." Cooper was touched. He'd lost friends in Afghanistan who had been helped by that organization. "That's very kind of you," he said softly. More people came to say goodbye. Jenny from the restaurant hugged him and told him she was finally going back to college, something she'd been afraid to do while the bikers were around. Sarah from the front desk brought him a free pass for his next visit. The lodge manager hurried out with some papers in his hand. "Mr. Cooper, before you go, we're making some changes to our security procedures. Would you mind looking these over? We want to make sure nothing like this happens again." Cooper spent a few minutes reviewing the new policies. They were good changes. Better lighting in the parking lot, security cameras in all public areas, direct emergency lines to the police station. He made a few suggestions about staff training and emergency responses. "Perfect," the manager said, taking notes. "Oh, and one more thing. The police found something interesting when they searched the bikers' rooms. Looks like Snake wasn't even his real name. He was wanted in 2 other states for similar crimes." Cooper wasn't surprised. Bullies like that often turned out to be frauds when you stood up to them. As he got ready to leave, he saw Captain Martinez's police car pulling into the lot. "Glad I caught you," she said, getting out. "Wanted to give you an update. We found their hideout yesterday, an old warehouse just outside of town. You'll never believe what we found there." She showed him some photos on her phone. The warehouse had been full of stolen goods, everything from motorcycles to electronics. There were also documents showing that the gang had been planning to expand their operation to other ski resorts in the area. "If you hadn't stopped them here," Martinez said, "they would have caused a lot more trouble. The district attorney is very happy with the case we're building." Cooper nodded, satisfied that justice would be done. He got into his truck and started the engine, but Martinez tapped on his window. "You know," she said with a smile, "most people take quiet vacations when they want to relax. But you took down an entire criminal gang." Cooper smiled back. Sometimes the best way to find peace is to fight for it. As he drove away from Pine Ridge Lodge, Cooper looked in his rearview mirror. The mountains stood tall and peaceful against the blue sky. The lodge looked welcoming again, with families arriving for their ski vacations, kids playing in the snow. His commanding officer had told him to take this break to decompress and reset. Looking back, Cooper realized that's exactly what he'd done, just not in the usual way. By helping others, by standing up to bullies, he remembered something important. The skills he'd learned in the military weren't just for the battlefield. They could also be used to protect people and bring peace to places that needed it. Cooper turned on the radio and pointed his truck toward home. Maybe next vacation he'd try somewhere warmer, though knowing his luck, he'd probably end up stopping a beach robbery or something. And that would be just fine with him.